ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our Saturday morning session. We shall continue on our journey of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, Devi and Asuri Sampada. Now today we will take from verse number 13 onwards. So let's take verse number 13 and 14 together, and then we will take 15 and 16 together. वे सोचा करते हैं कि मैंने आज यह प्राप्त कर लिया और अब इस मनोरथ को प्राप्त कर लूंगा। मेरे पास इतना धन है और फिर भी यह हो जाएगा। वह शत्रु मेरे द्वारा मारा गया और उन दूसरे शत्रुओं को भी मैं मार डालूंगा। मैं ईश्वर हूं, ऐश्वर्य का भोगने वाला हूं, मैं सब सिद्धियों से युक्त हूं, बलवान और सुखी हूं। Now we discussed this briefly, that there are two fundamental ingredients which lead to this kind of thinking. The first is that the whole universe is an accident. There is no regulator, there is no power pervading the universe, and therefore I can do whatever I feel like. I am a product of an accident, so whatever I do, I do. Whatever I feel like, whatever makes me happy, I do. So that is one fundamental logic behind this kind of thinking. In that kind of thinking, you don't have what we call karma siddhant, that whatever you do, you will reap the harvest. That very concept is nullified in that kind of thinking. So you feel that I am free to do whatever I like. And that is the behavior which is ultimately leading to Asuri Sampada. The second premise of that behavior we discussed was Dambha, Man and Mad. That the person is highly egoistic and he is driven by his ego and his desires, that I keep satisfying my desire, and that is the ultimate aim of life. So this is what is explained here in verse number 13 and 14, that I have satisfied so many of my desires. I have acquired this wealth, I have acquired this power, I have acquired this position, and I shall continue to acquire more and more. This is what the people of this kind of thinking keep planning and executing. Now, if we recall, many of our colleagues, many of us have passed through that same phase in our life. We have realized that we were aspiring to become very good student. I'll, get first position in this particular course. Then I'll join a great, organization or a company, or I'll start my own enterprise. And then I will earn so much wealth, and I will, have this kind of facility, that facility. I'll travel around the world, and I'll have this facility, that kind of, clothing, that kind of food. All these things have been part of the thinking in many of us in the past. And this thinking, we realize that keep actually increasing with time. It is not that they are satisfied and you are happy. No, the happiness is an elusive process there. It's like, you see the water in the desert. You don't really see the water in desert. You see the sunlight in desert, and you feel there's a water. So it's like a mirage. So these satisfaction of these desires is a mirage. You feel that yes, you are reaching somewhere, you are reaching a life which will give you happiness, but ultimately it does not. So Lord Krishna is explaining this in these actually 4 verses, that the people think, the people who have asuri sampada, they think that I have satisfied this particular desire, now I can satisfy the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and this process continues forever. Then in verse number 14, he says that he thinks that he has killed one of his enemies. Now he will kill the next one. Why do we have that process of killing enemies? Because we feel that we can do anything we feel like. There's no consequence of your karma in that kind of thinking. And therefore, you are free to kill anybody to satisfy your ego. Ego and desires, these are the two main drivers of life in case of a person who is driven by Asuri Sampada. So he is driven by these two things, ego and desire, and therefore he does not hesitate to kill people. He considers everybody else as enemy. Now, why does he consider everybody else as enemy? Because he feels that the whole world is designed for him, and he is free to exploit anything in this world. Everybody is at his service. In Sanskrit, we can say, सबको साधन समझता है. He considers everybody as his means, and he can use those means to, to satisfy his desires, to satisfy his ego. This is the process which actually leads to further intensification of his enmity towards other human beings. So that is why he engages in the process of either killing or defeating all others. And that desire is the desire which is never satisfied. When he feels that I have, become like goat and I'm very happy, I can control the whole world. Now, if you look at Hiranyakashipu's life, he did that. He claimed that he is the goat and he has been able to, control the whole universe, whole world. And he wanted everybody to worship him. He said that he is the God. And then what happened to him? His own son Prahlad actually became the cause of his destruction. So, such kind of people, they keep thinking that they have become very strong and they should be worshipped. They are like goats and they have acquired, wealth. They have rolling in luxuries. That kind of thinking comes into play in their life. Now, this is what the process is. He's explaining the process. He's not explaining the consequences here. The explanation of consequences will come little later, but this is the process in which these people remain engaged. And this process is infinite. This continues for, ever. Now, verse number 15 and 16, we will take them together. मैं बड़ा धनी और बड़े कुटुंब वाला हूं, मेरे समान दूसरा कौन है? मैं यज्ञ करूंगा, दान दूंगा और आमोद प्रमोद करूंगा. इस प्रकार अज्ञान से मोहित रहने वाले तथा अनेक प्रकार से भ्रमित चित्त वाले, जाल रूप में समावृत और विषय भोगों में अत्यंत आसक्त आसुर लोग महान अपवित्र नरक में गिरते हैं. Now these verses require very in-depth study. Now the Sanskrit verse is adhyobhi. Adhyobhi means that I'm very rich. Eh? Then Janvansmi. Janvansmi means I have a lot of people around me, that I have a big family, Kutumbwala. So he becomes extremely proud or arrogant of the fact that he has acquired a lot of wealth, he has a big family, and there's nobody who can compare with him. You will find this kind of tendencies prevailing in many parts of the world today, including many parts of my own state. I can see people that they also give the example कि इसकी मूछें तो ऊपर ही रहती हैं, इसकी मूछें नीचे नहीं होती हैं. That means he is highly arrogant and he wants to establish his control over whatever the territory he is living in. It may be a village, it may be a constituency, it may be a town, or it may be even a small what you call habitation called Dhani in Rajasthan. So this is the kind of thinking that I have a lot of wealth, I have a lot of family around me, and there's nobody who can compare with me. And then he plans that, okay, when the time comes, I will, he says, yaksha dasyam me, that I will do yajna. I will do, donation of the money. That kind of thinking he develops. And then he says, by doing all that, he will get over whatever wrongs he did. In the first place, he doesn't think he is doing any wrong because he believes in a theory that there's no regulator in the world and his karmas have no consequences, and therefore he doesn't believe he's doing wrong. But even if he feels that sometimes, then he says he will be able to overcome those wrongs through donating or through performing yagnas. So that kind of thinking he develops. Now the verse number 16 gives a very fundamental reason why all this happens. These processes, why they take place. There's a word here, anek chitta vibranta, mohajal samavrata. This is the first part of the verse. Anek chitta vibranta. This kind of person does not have a particular direction. Sometimes he feels that he can get happiness from the wealth. Sometimes he feels he can get happiness from sexual desires. Sometimes he feels that he can get happiness from position of power. Sometimes he drives himself to a social objective so that he can get happiness through social status. So he has multiple, anek chit, variety of thinking. He has multiple thoughts, and those thoughts drive him in different directions. Like he's, standing on a crossroad, on a roundabout, and he's driven to different, directions from that roundabout. That do this, you will get happiness, do this, you will get happiness. And therefore, he keeps attempting to do that. And then what is the word which has been used? Vibranta. That he is completely deluded in the process because he has tried everything in the life, but he's not getting any stable, lasting happiness despite all that. So he becomes absolutely deluded. So all this process is anek chitta vibranta. And this anek chitta vibranta leads to what? Mohajal samavrata. It leads to a sort of labyrinth. It leads to a sort of, infinite web in which he keep moving from one direction to another. Mohajal, a jal, a very big wave he creates out of moh. Moh is because he gets attached to a particular variety of thing like wealth or prestige or power or sexual desires or whatever. So he remains attached to all those desires, and those desires drive him because of the moha. Moha means attachment to those desires. They drive him to a web, and he keeps rotating in that web. Now, Because of that rotation, he completely submerged. He is submerged into. Now, this is what, let me explain this with one or two examples. There are some people who are very, they feel that they should go to different restaurants. I have seen people, today they go to Japanese, next day they go to, Chinese, then they go to Indian, then they go to Mexican, then they go to, some, I don't know what other food, Korean or whatever. So they feel that they will keep tasting variety of foods, and then they remain engaged. They start comparing, this is what, and they remain so much engaged in the different variety of foods. That is a kind of wave they have created. Anybody who meets them, he will also advise them to do the similar kind of thing. And he will boast that, okay, I went to this restaurant today. Then he will put his picture on the Facebook. Then he will do something on Instagram. And he tries to, make people, feel that this guy is great. Now, this is one thing. Some people travel, somebody goes to one country, then another place, third place, fourth place, and the mountains to desert to this and that. And then they try to project themselves that, okay, they are great travelers, and they put all those pictures. Now they get actually woven into that jal, into that web, and that never ending process, one after another, continues. Okay, we have seen this, now we should see this, now we should see this. This desire, I'm not saying these things are wrong. What I'm saying, that if you weave a net of these things around you, that is wrong. If you remain attached and weave a net, then that net is actually becomes a sort of prison for you. Then you become prisoner of that particular thinking, whether it is a thinking of food and restaurants, whether it is thinking of travel, whether it is a thinking of variety of what you call clubs and other desires which you satisfy in different ways, or you go and occupy different positions of power. All that becomes like a web in themselves. If you do these things in a limited way without attachment, it's fine. But when you remain attached, and when you become you create a web around you of all these things, then it is not desirable. Then you become prisoner of those desires. So this is what I have, I wanted to mention by this particular wording of this, verse. Anek chitta vibranta moh jal samavrita. Now this is very, very important, that we have multiple thinking to satisfy our desires, get happiness. We roam into different directions. Then each of those directions create a web for us, and we remain engaged into that web. And that web actually subsumes us. We become prisoner of that web. So this is what Lord Krishna is saying. This is how people remain engaged into these desires. Then he says, prasakti काम भोगेशु papanti narkesu cho. That because of these, then these people remain so much attached to desires, because that web they have created around themselves, they remain excessively attached to those desires. And those desires actually become the cause of their uh, unhappiness, cause of their all the problems. And this is what Asur Lok, a Pavitra Narak. It is not that, there is no, God is not like a person who is sitting upstairs who sends you to Narak and Swarg. No, it is not like that. The Supreme is actually at the very base of this whole universe. The whole universe is, you know, floating on that base, like the waves are floating on the ocean. Similarly, the Supreme is at the base, and the whole universe is, actually rolling or performing or moving on that base. So he is not one single person, like some religions believe that he is a supreme and he will give you the judgment on the day of judgment, he will punish you or he will give you the heaven. That is not like this. He has set up a system in this universe. That system is basically karm phal. Whatever you do, you will reap the harvest of that. So he is not giving you, he is not rewarding you or punishing you. The reward and punishment comes from your own actions. You reward yourself and you punish yourself through your own actions. So he is saying that if you create this jal, if you create this web around you of variety of desires, and then you remain absolutely engaged into those desires, then you automatically create trouble for your own life. Then you create unhappiness for your own self. And that is what आसुरी लोग पवित्र नरक में गिरते हैं, पतंति नरके असुचो. Now they fall on their own. Nobody else is driving them there. Because of their own actions, they fall into those, unpleasant situations, and those unpleasant situations become, attachment of our life or a mission of our life, and because of that, we get into trouble and we suffer. Our sufferings come from that creation which we do. And that is what Lord Krishna is saying here. It is not that he puts them into narak or not that, but our own actions lead to that. But a person who believes that whole universe is accidental, as was explained in verse number 8, and who doesn't believe in a supreme power, no regulator, that is the kind of person who ends up in this kind of web. Because all others who believe in a supreme power, who believe in a regulator, they will not end up doing this kind of thing. They will actually have fear. They will have fear of their own actions, that my actions might lead me to trouble or to sufferings. But the person who does not believe in a regulator, who does not believe in the theory of karma, then naturally does not have that fear of suffering. And therefore, he does this kind of actions without realizing, and therefore he falls into a trap, and that trap leads to the sufferings. Now, if you look at these four verses and the theory of Buddhism, Lord Buddha, they are very much similar. In fact, Lord Buddha says that, in this world there is suffering, and the cause of suffering is the desires. You have desires, therefore, you have sufferings, and the desires can be overcome, and therefore the sufferings can be overcome. That is the crux, in a few words, of the theory of Lord Buddha. His philosophy is based on this, that there are sufferings in the world. The sufferings arise from the desires. The desires can be controlled, and he has given a particular path how to control the desires. And then you can overcome those sufferings through overcoming the process of desires. Now, precisely this is the foundation. In fact, I would say the foundation of Buddha's theory is lying here. Lord Krishna is explaining why these desires happen, what is the process of their happening, and why they lead to you to sufferings. And then this particular part of the verse, anek chitta vibhranta mohajal samavarta. This is the what you call the key word in these four verses. The whole process, how it happens, and how we become prisoner of our own creation, of our own actions. So this is what we should avoid in life, we must avoid that we do not remain excessively attached to any desires. We don't create a web of desires, and we remain what you call detached. If we can remain akarta, that we if we can, distance the doer, that would be the great thing. But if we can't do that, then at least we can remain detached from the actions we are doing. So the detachment and kartapan ka abhav, these are the two essential characteristics to get over this web of desires. So then now let's go to verse number 17. आत्म संभाविता स्तब्धा धन मान मदान्विता, वे अपने आप को श्रेष्ठ मानने वाले घमंडी पुरुष धन और मान के मद से युक्त होकर केवल नाम मात्र के यज्ञों के द्वारा पाखंड से शास्त्र विधि रहित यजन करते हैं. Now this explains in the process which has been explained in the above verses. This concludes here that these people consider themselves superior because they have the ego. The three words, Dambh, Man, and Mad, which were the foundation of this whole process, apart from lack of faith in the supreme power. Now that process of Mad, Man, and ego, that is the one which is the causing all this problem. And then these people claim to be doing yagna and donations, but those are not according to what we call proper procedures, because they are engaged in attachment. They consider themselves the doer. If you have the feeling of that you are the doer, if you have attachment to the actions you are doing, then you cannot do any yagna. For doing yagna and donation, you have to first detach yourself from the action, and then also you have to reach a stage where you feel that you are simply an instrument in the overall, what you call this entity called universe. You are a small little instrument which has been sent to perform your activities. You are not the doer. You are not, the ruler here. Now, this kind of people who have excessive arrogance, who have excessive ego or arrogance or ego or so-called self-respect, those people will consider themselves as the doer. You see the TV debate every day. In variety of TV debates, you will find that everybody claims to be that I am the superior, I am the doer, I am right, you are not right, you are wrong. What I say is correct, what I do is right. Now that feeling comes from this arrogance. That feeling comes from this ego, that I am the supreme, I am the doer. Now those people who considers themselves a small little, instrument of the supreme in this universe, they will be polite. Their action will be absolutely driven by politeness. He feels that I have been sent to do something, I do and finish. I am not the doer, I am an instrument in the process of doing. So that feeling must come. If once you get that feeling, then I think we are on the right path. So long as we feel that I am the doer or I am the supreme and I am the ruler, and I can control things, I can kill people and I can fulfill my desires by accumulating wealth, I am the rich and I can control others, I become supreme. Now that feeling, which actually has been exemplified by Hiranyakashipu's behavior, if you have read about him or if you have seen, film based on that, then you will realize that that behavior is driven precisely by this kind of arrogance, this kind of wealth. To some extent, the behavior of Ravana was also driven by this. Ravana was called Pandit in certain ways in terms of knowledge, but he was also very arrogant. And he thought that he is the controller. He claimed that all the devtas were under his control and he was able to, rule the world. That was his, thinking. Now that thinking actually became the cause of his destruction. All the troubles he invited, all the sufferings he invited because of that thinking. So these are the two examples in ancient India which I can give Hiranyakashipu and Ravana very clearly. To some extent, Duryodhan is also a falling into the same category because Duryodhan also felt that he has a big empire and he can easily destroy his enemies. The Pandavas, he considered them enemies and he tried to destroy them in variety of ways, but he did not succeed. But he thought that he would be able to do that. So that kind of thinking that I'll destroy this, I will destroy that, and I will earn a lot of wealth, I'll become, a superior human being, and I will be able to live in luxury. All that thinking is Asuri thinking. That thinking comes from the fact that your actions have no consequences and there's no regulator. The regulator does not mean that a person is sitting in the high in the sky and he gives you judgment that you did wrong. The regulator is a self-regulation in the universe. The law, like the law of gravity works. You throw a stone up, it automatically comes down. There's nobody who is pulling it down. It automatically happens because there's a force in the nature which pulls it. Similarly, there's a force in the nature which gives you the result or outcome of your action. So it is not given by XYZ, it is given by the principles of the nature. You may call them, some people may call it nature, some people may call him Paramatma or Parmeswar. Name is not important, but the fact is that there are certain rules regulating this universe. And one of those rules is that whatever action you will perform, you will get the harvest of those actions. So that is one of the rules which actually should guide our actions. But those people who do not believe in that regulator, they are not thinking about that regulation, about that rule, and they behave erratically according to their own wish, and they are driven by their desires and their ego and their what you call arrogance. So this is what Lord Krishna is saying up to this, and whatever they try to perform certain acts like yagna and donation, dan, giving to the people. Now, those are also not done in good faith because their very foundation is wrong, and therefore they do not give them the positive outcome. And that is what Lord Krishna has emphasized in these verses. Now, verse number 18, it continues on the same similar lines. वे अहंकार बल घमंड कामना और क्रोधादि के प्रायण और दूसरों की निंदा करने वाले पुरुष अपने और दूसरों के शरीर में स्थित मुझ अंतर्यामी से द्वेष करने वाले होते हैं. Now, if we recall verses 60 to 64 in chapter 2, Lord Krishna has given a very scientific explanation how the internal human process functions, how the desires take place, how we become angry, how the anger turns into further arrogance, and then how our what you call intellect, vivek, is destroyed, and how then we behave in a very demonic way. Now that process applies here as well. Now, this is the similar kind of explanation given here. वे अहंकार बल घमंड कामना और क्रोध. Now, ahankar is the foundation. Bal means the power or the strength or the, it could be physical power, it could be power of the position, it could be prestige in the society, it could be the power of wealth that actually gives further, what you call incentive to boost the ego. Ahankar ko boost karta. Then it becomes ghamand. The ahankar becomes ghamand because it is boosted by these forces. These forces are the forces of power. Power could be physical power, it could be power of the position, then the power of the wealth, the power of social status, or power of, whatever the person considers. All that bal, all that power actually provides a new fillip to that ahankar, and then it becomes arrogance, ghamand. It becomes worse. So this is the process here which has been explained. And then with that arrogance, you try to fulfill kamna, your desires. You already have tremendous arrogance because of this so-called wealth and power. So you have become very arrogant, and then you try to fulfill your desires. And when you are unable to fulfill your desire, you become angry, krodh. So you become angry because you obviously nobody can fulfill all the desires. It's impossible. And there would be, even if you fulfill, there would be some process. In the process, you will face many hurdles. There would be a lot of people who will compete with you. You will consider them as enemies, and you will try to destroy them. Like you want to acquire a larger empire. Obviously, there are other people who will oppose it. So you try to destroy those people, you control them, and maybe finally you acquire that empire. But that empire acquisition is not easy, and therefore, in the process, you will become angry, you will have to face a lot of hurdles, and all that process actually consumes you totally. You forget who you are. You forget what is the mission of life, but you remain totally consumed into that process. So, inke parayan means they overtake you. What overtakes you? The ahankar, that is ego, then bal, all these powers which you acquire, then ghamand, the arrogance which is coming out of those powers, then the desires which you want to fulfill, and then if you are not able to fulfill those desires, you become angry. So all this process overtakes you. You are not in your own senses. You lose your own knowledge. Who you are, you completely forget, and you are overtaken by this process. So this is very important here. So in this process, you remain engaged in the world. And that engagement actually also leads to what you call hating others, दूसरों की निंदा करना. Obviously, when you want to control others, you want to control greater empire, you want to exercise more power, you want that everybody should be subservient to you. They should follow your command because you have acquired so much wealth and power. And in that process, obviously, you do not respect others' existence. So you condemn them, or you slowly, you become their enemy, or either you destroy them, you kill them, or you hate them. Now, here Lord Krishna is saying that since I am sitting in everybody's heart, he is the substratum of this existence, he is everywhere. So, since I am sitting in their heart, by this process, you are actually hurting me also, hurting the Supreme, hurting the the power which runs this universe. And therefore, the word which he has used, antaryami se dves karne wale. That antaryami is the supreme who is sitting in everybody's heart. So you are actually having a sort of hatred towards him, and therefore you cannot achieve positive results. So these this verse and the verse which is verse number 16 and verse number 18, they are very profound verses. We must understand this process, how it works. Now, in this verse number 18, the Sanskrit verse reads like this: Ahankaram balam darpam kamam krodham cha sangrita. Now, this is the process that first you have ahankar. Ahankar is the basis. Bal, balam comes from variety of things, from money, from power, from prestige, from body, whatever, health. And then you become arrogant, and then you try to fulfill your desire because of that arrogance. All you can fulfill every desire, that is what you feel. And when you are finding hurdles on the way, you become angry. So this process overtakes. I think we must understand this internal functioning of our body, how this works. If we can understand this, then we can, actually improve upon it. Then we will not be a prisoner of this process. Normally, we are the prisoner of this process. So this is, once you become prisoner of this process, then when you try to condemn others, when you try to hate others, then you are actually hating the Supreme. You are creating hatred against the Supreme, who is everywhere, who is in everybody's heart. And that process we must avoid. So this is what Lord Krishna is saying here. So I would like to summarize this because these are very practical points which we must understand in our life. And once we understand these practical points, I think we will be able to do what we call sadhana. We can improve ourselves slowly, slowly. So here in verse number 12, he said, आशा की सैकड़ों फांसियों से, that we have these expectations everywhere, and because of these expectations we create these फांसियां, these chains around us. The chain coming from the son, from the wife, from neighbor, from boss, from power structure, from government, and God knows, there's variety of chains which come into existence because we have those expectations. We have expectations from the government, we have expectation from the neighbor, we have expectation from our spouse, we have expectation from our son, our daughter, our brother, our sister, other, even from our friends. So all those expectations from the institutions with which you deal with, all those expectations create a sort of chain in which we are, bound. We are, you know, we are chained because of that. Chained. The whole process leads to our getting chained into those expectations. So that is very important. And then how we feel that we will be able to do this today, this tomorrow, this next day, this process of doing, that I have fulfilled this desire today, then I'll fulfill this tomorrow. And then I have killed this enemy today, I'll kill this enemy tomorrow, and I will destroy this person day after. And then I'll become absolutely powerful. I'll become, wealthy. I'll control this universe. Now that kind of feeling comes into play. This is the process which moves further, and that process leads you to feel that I have a lot of power, I have a lot of big family, I have a lot of wealth, and therefore I can control the universe. And then why this happens? This happens because of anek chitta vibranta. We keep moving in different directions to acquire this kind of wealth and desire, this kind of power and desire, and then create a mohajal samavrata, and we are completely overtaken by that web of our own creation because of these processes. And these processes are led by ahankar, bal, ghamand. That is, the starts with ahankar, then all the powers which you accumulate adds, gives a new fillip to that ahankar. It becomes ghamand. Then you have desires which you want to fulfill. If you are not able to fulfill, you become angry and you become frustrated. You become unhappy. You end up in sufferings. So this is the process which Lord Krishna has explained, and this process ultimately leads to actually despising or creating hatred against the Supreme, because the Supreme is existing everywhere, whether all species of life, and whatever species you want to hurt in the process, ultimately you are hurting the Supreme. And hurting the Supreme means you are hurting yourself. That is what happens. So this is where I would conclude today. But before I conclude, I would request you to see that video which I put on Atma Bodh yesterday. This is a video of a person who is still alive. She is in Manila, and she underwent a treatment of cancer in Hong Kong. And how what happened to her, she has explained that in detail. And once she left her body, where she went, and how she felt completely liberated. She felt that there was no constraint of time, there was no constraint of any nature, there was no difference between past, present, and future. And she was, eternally happy. How that explains that person is still alive. The person has passed through this. He has written a book based on that. The book has become a bestseller in New York. So I would request, see that there is a life. Some people don't believe that there is a supreme and what happens after death and nothing. There is a life after death. The body dies, you don't die. And what kind of experience you have once you die, that has been briefly explained by her. So that will give us a new, sort of thinking and light in our life, that after we leave this body, we are not constrained by body, we are not constrained by anything in life. We transcend the limits of, world. We transcend the limit of time. You can also see the past and the present and the future together. That's what she explains here there. So I think this is going to be interesting for all of us. Just have a look at that. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, I'll try to, answer as much as I can. Thank you.